y'all. Welcome to another chat. So listen, I'm working on these basically because I want to get a grasp of what people are wanting to learn and where we want to go with series, right? There's so much to do. There's so many other coaches doing stuff. As being an actor, but also being a behavioral scientist and social psychologist, and trained in neuroscience and all that good stuff, right, Coach? So I do want to explore something today, and sorry, I just finished like a peanut butter Powerball. I feel like one of those dogs that have eaten, right, and you can't open your like mouth. So I want to talk to you about two types of effort, but this is actually going to go much deeper than that, okay? Because the original topic that I was going to talk about is identity, but identity is about effort or effortlessness, okay? And so we're going to now really have to deep dive into this. And I got about 20 minutes, okay? So there's two types of effort. Okay, and I want to talk about this culture effort, as in this world, the 3D world or stage world or the world of shadows or whatever you want to call it, right? That sounds like something out of like a Batman like comic or something. Or like the League of Shadows. Okay, so in this particular world, and especially in the business world, and you may have even heard of this phrase, maybe you haven't, but we have this kind of like worship or this ideology, meaning a way of thinking about effort. And we've worshiped it, especially in the business world. And so it's called hustle culture. And hustle culture basically, and I'm like, as somebody who has been in the business world and all this kind of stuff, how much it's become so popular. Like so much so that people feel guilty if they're not hustling. Now, hustling doesn't mean I'm going to and try to like steal people or lie to people to get money. A hustle culture means, hey, listen, if I work 9 to 5 and I don't want to be working at that job, well, then guess what? I have from 5 till 6 a.m., right? Or whatever it is to use all of those hours. So working like 17 hours a day, 16 hours a day, right? And so hustle culture says you've got to work your ass off to get what you want. You've got to work as hard as you can, and you've got to exert yourself to the point of exhaustion. And if you're not, then you should feel like a piece of shit, right? And that is ultimately the heartbeat behind hustle culture. Now, anybody who is a defender of hustle culture, right, will completely and utterly disagree with that caricature, okay? But as somebody who's been in that world and around people who worship the idea of hustling, right? That's one way of efforting, okay? So when you're manifesting, well, first and foremost, if you've already figured this out, you can't hustle manifesting. Meaning like, I don't care if you're like doing affirmations 14 hours a day, and then you realize, oh shit, I've been affirming for the last year for 14 hours a day and nothing's happening, right? So that's why I wanted to talk about hustle culture for a second, because you live in a world, in a stage world, at least in the West, that really does worship the idea of hustling. The idea of, I've got to have 5 different jobs. The idea of, if I don't, then I'm not working hard enough, right? And so, with the whole hustle culture ideology, is you got to effort your way towards whatever it is that you want, right? And if you don't, then you should feel shamed. You should feel guilty. You should feel invaluable. Not invaluable. You should feel valueless, right? And you should feel like something that you can't, and you should feel like it's always in your control. Meaning, hey, if I have 24 hours a day, then I should be able to work 17 hours a day. It doesn't matter about my mental health, how much time I'm not spending with my kids or my wife or whatever, you know what I mean? If my car breaks down, it doesn't matter everything else I neglect as long as I'm investing in the hustle culture. That's one identity, right? And again, the reason why I say Western culture is because you can go to other non-Western cultures like the Middle East or, Pakistan. And these are places that I've lived, right? And they'll have like siestas like they do in Spain, right? Where they'll like, actually, you know what? We're going to actually embed rest. We're going to actually put in rest. I didn't even mean to make that joke, in bed rest, but, right. But to actually put rest into their day of life, but not just as a job, as a whole culture, right? And so the reason being that you need to be aware of this is because if you're living in the West, like America, right, then you're going to be taught that this is the way to be. Okay. And the problem is that you're going to then think and measure all of your manifestations against the identity of being someone who endorses or lives by or propagates or whatever it is, the idea of and the values of hustle culture. Which means if you're doing something wrong, which by the way, you can't really do anything wrong with manifestation, right? Because you're always manifesting anyways. But the one thing that you can do that's not helpful is try to adapt, meaning take the ideas and values of hustle culture and try to adapt it to manifestation, right? Because then that means you're trying to measure yourself about what, am I not doing this? Am I not doing that? Am I not doing this? So you're constantly measuring yourself against what you're not doing. Because that's what hustle culture is. Like, hey, wait a minute. If I'm working 6 hours after already working an 8-hour day and I'm only working 6 hours, dude, I should be working another like 12 hours, right? I should be working the 18 to 19 hours a day, right? And if you're not, then you're a piece of shit, right? And so this is what happens when, especially in Western cultures where we're learning manifestation and then we start measuring ourselves because we're measuring ourselves against the culture. And so we think, oh, something's wrong, like, right, something I've done is incorrect. So then we create, right? And this is what I have a very interesting conversation with somebody about this today. We create rules and rites of passage and behaviors and value systems around, oh my gosh, am I affirming enough? Am I hanging out with my manifestation group? Which is like church anyways. And then, am I reading Neville enough? Right? All of these kinds of things. Am I reading my tarot enough? Am I reading my astrological signs? Am I seeing the birds before landing? As in like, oh, am I seeing 4444 and am I rubbing my rabbit's foot? All of these kinds of things. Those all have an identity. Right. And those and that identity is this, and this is very important. Okay. And this is what I really want to talk about. That identity is based upon one thing: lack. You don't have. Why would you need to work 18 hours a day if you already had your business and it was a success to the point that you are a millionaire? Right. And by the way, let me just say this. That's what you want to go for. You want to go for wealth, not riches. Okay. Because the person who has an identity of wealth versus riches is the difference between the person who hold on to their trauma around money and the person who lets it go and becomes somebody else different, right? And so it's the same with any relationship thing that you're trying to manifest, car, whatever it is that you want in this world, okay? You are always manifesting from an identity, right? Neville calls it a state. Okay, that state is simply just a body of beliefs. But those bodies of beliefs are who you are. That's what you have to realize. So science even shows this, right? Neuroscience shows this, that the brain can't tell the difference between a belief that you accept as true and what you're actually doing every single day physically in the world, right? It cannot, which means you're living your beliefs. And if you've come here and you've thought, oh, wait, I just have beliefs and then I'm living my life. No, you're living your beliefs, and where your beliefs are, there you are, right? And so you have to realize that whatever beliefs you've accepted as true, you've created an identity, a personal reality, a personality around it. The way that Neville calls that is when your assumptions harden into fact. That means you've created like a lens or a pair of glasses, and that is the way that you start measuring everything. So again, if you're from the hustle culture, or subculture within America, for example, then you're going to measure everything, even your manifestations. Oh man, I'm not working hard enough. So then you think it's about effort. So then you start defining yourself by the effort or lack of effort that you're doing. Okay. What does Neville say though? He said, this should all be effortless. Okay. This is the second part that I wanted to talk about. This should all be effortless. But then people are going in and they're like, I've got to bust a vessel, right? Trying to create a scene, like some sort of imaginary or vision scene, right? Or they're doing like, I've got to do 1,000 affirmations, or I've got to write this down 500 times like Bart Simpson, right? Whatever it is. And then they think, well, this is all about effort. This is, see, and so what, but the problem is that people have spiritualized it. So then they're like, oh, well, that's different effort because that's just the world. And no, but there is effort here and I need to be doing this effort. And I know, because if manifestation is all about beliefs, which it is, right? And it's not about emotions or thoughts, as you may have been taught, right? But it is about beliefs, which, yes, you can tell what you believe through the thoughts and the emotions and the words that you're choosing, but those are not manifesting. What are manifesting are the beliefs, which is really your personality, which is really your way of seeing the world, okay? So when your way of seeing the world is your way of being in the world, right? Then you begin to accept, oh shit, like I need to be very aware, very active, very co-creative with the inner self, right? Of making sure that I modify the beliefs that I don't want to have, right? But let's go back to this effort, because people are really going to misunderstand this, because especially when you read Neville for the first time and he talks about how this should be effortless, your brain may go to, oh, so anything that I do that feels like pushing my thoughts away, or like meditation, or if I feel like I need to go into nature or anything outside of myself, then is automatically means that I'm efforting. No, it doesn't. Right? And I'm going to talk about this in way more depth later about second causes, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about second causes, and it's creating this idea of like, well, I can't use anything. I can't use like therapy. I can't use medicine. I can't use books. I can't use, no, Neville's not talking about that. The guy read vociferously. Yes, read and use that word in like a party and you'll be awesome. But that just means very passionately and like extensively, right? And so you need to be aware that when he says that this is effortless, he's saying that you're doing it from an identity. Okay, so for example, when a painter paints, there's no effort, right? You may think from the outside, oh yeah, but the effort is him getting up, getting motivation, grabbing the paints, grabbing the paintbrushes, and actually physically painting. That's all effort, right? No, that's not effort. That's you measuring effort through the culture that has taught you that if you're not physically doing something, then you're efforting, right? And so Neville is not saying that you don't need, right? Yes. Hi, Tom. Welcome, by the way. Welcome to the channel. Yeah, so I'm talking about Neville Goddard, right? And so, and also Joseph Murphy and their mentor, right? Abdullah, and also the Kybalion, right? The Emerald Tablets. All of these are all talking about this idea of effortless creation, okay? So when an artist who loves what they're doing, who is doing what they're doing, getting up and doing what they're doing, it's not effort, right? Even Alan Watts talks about this, right? And this concept of doing something that you love so much, right, that you feel like you're almost doing nothing, okay? That's what he means by it being effortless. So what would that do for you? Okay, so let's say you don't have a car, or you want a new car, whatever it is. Well, you're gonna have to shift mentally, and yes, so that's where the effort comes from. Okay, because you're shifting identities. That's what you're doing. So when you shift to the new identity, guess what? It's going to be effortless, right? And so yes, you have to do the mental work. That's what Neville calls the 6 days. Okay, and so right, and so good question. So I do want to talk about saturation, because that's one of the things that I've been writing a lot about, and on my articles over at Reddit. So we got to talk about saturation, drenching, and intensification. These are 3 different, related, but different techniques that Neville brings up in his work, right? And so when you're dealing with this idea, okay, of effort, remember, let's use another simple example, okay? Let's say somebody who is a guitarist. When they get up and they've already been playing it for a while, they're just playing guitar. To us, they're like, whoa, that's like, that must have taken a lot of what? Effort. We're always measuring things against effort. To him, it's effortless, right? And so that's what it means when we're shifting states. There is a 6 days. That's proverbial, by the way. Neville talks about this, right? It's the proverbial 6 days, which is just a metaphor for how long it takes you to get from not having the car to car owner. And when somebody's a car owner, right? It's effortless. They go out, they put the key in the ignition, and boom. When you lack a car, you don't have that. So then you think, oh my gosh, I have to effort. I mean, I have to work at a job. I have to work a 9 to 5. I have to make all this money. All of these kinds of things that you think are necessary to make and create, right? That's what Neville is differentiating. But he's differentiating it this way. You've got to know who you are, right? You've got to know that you are God. That's what I wanted to talk about today, is the tale of two identities, right? Because this identity over here, which is all ego-driven and label-based, and you're creating categories with your mind everywhere you go all the time, right? And research shows that we do this, hence why we have stereotypes and racism and all of this kind of stuff, right? Your brain's always kind of going through, right, the ego and so on and so forth, right? And so... and actually, I do see both of your responses, and I want to get to them, so please stay on. But when you're ego-based, everything's effort. Why? Because this world worships effort, and it's created a religion out of effort. Like, you full-on worship it, and if you're not part of it, then you're a piece of shit. You're homeless, you're not working hard enough, you haven't given any effort, right? Hello. Hey Turkey, how are you doing? Yeah, and that's a great question, by the way. And I want to answer all three of these. These are very important ones, and I'm not just saying that. They're actually very important, but I want to get this thought out. So when you're dealing with who you think you are, okay, and you have a very, very, actually, I'm going to work this backwards, right, to the last question here. Thank you for your question. Welcome to the channel, by the way. And just to say, I do coaching. It's all science-backed, neuroscience-based, all of this kind of stuff. So get in touch if you're interested. But, what I wanted to say is, if your definition is ego-based, you will always have to effort. That's just the way it is, right? If it's based upon who you think you are, is this flesh suit, then you're going to effort. That's it. Like, there isn't an option two, right? Unless you're like born into like a rich family, right? Or whatever it is. But when you work on yourself from within, which is God, right? And you are God. And, Turkey, I want to answer that question. But I really, really want you to answer that question, right? And I did a video on that today as well. Go check that out. Because how I define God is going to be different than you define God, because you have a different experience than I have, right? But the way that I define God is all powerful, right? So I'll take the basic boring concepts of God, and I will say that that's who my imagination is. So all powerful, all loving, all giving, right? Never says no, super supportive, just the embodiment of love, like Neville calls it liquid light, right? All of this kind of stuff. But he also calls it love, right? The embodiment of love. So for me, I always go back to that. But remember, and this is going to be crazy, you also have to define love. Because the problem is we live in a culture, right? Or like, as the Joker said, we live in a society, right? And so we live in a culture, okay, that defines love one way. And maybe your family has taught you another way on how to define love, and so on and so forth. And so, and maybe romantic comedies have defined love a certain way. So for me, I take it the Greek way, which is agape, which is really a violent form of love, meaning it's death to the self. It's like, I remember reading some sort breakdown of this word, and it was graphic. Like, I mean, basically, it's symbolic, obviously, but it's like beheading yourself. Like, and Neville talks about this, right? Basically, changing states is removing one way to perceive the world and replacing it with another, right? And so when you are talking about God and states and love, then you're like, oh, well, then the greatest act of love for myself, to myself, is to change states, right? That's what God is. That's what love is, right? And so, and then let me go back to Raheem here because I have. Okay, sorry about that. Sorry if it froze for a second. So again, I want to go back to Raheem here. Okay, so what about saturation? Is it considered effort? Okay, so again, remember the question is: are you doing saturation from the perspective of somebody who needs to do saturation to get what they want? Right? Or is it saturation because you're feeling the emotions, right, of the person who already has everything that they want? Do you hear the difference, Raheem? And so when you're doing saturation, and if some of you don't know what I'm talking about, you're creating a scene, you're saturating it with everything, by the way. When I say saturating, you're saturating it with sound, you're saturating it with touch, you're saturating it with feeling, you're saturating it with interpretation, you're saturating it, which means you're immersing it. So when you feel it real. You feel like, oh my gosh, I'm there, I'm doing it. It's like you stepped out of this universe and entered the universe where you have what it is that you want. And so what Raheem is asking is, is saturation effort? And again, if saturation is part of your tool belt, it shouldn't feel that way. If it feels that way and you feel like you're efforting it, meaning if you feel like I'm like about to crap my pants because I'm trying to make myself feel a certain way, then you're doing it from lack, right? And so Neville talks about how this is very much like a romance, okay? And so when he's talking about romance, you have to understand this is wooing. What that means is you can't force the inner self to say, I feel this way, right? You can romance it. You can woo it, right? You can create a relationship with it. And this is one of the things I teach all my clients. And think about joining the actual program if you're interested, is that you need to actually date the inner self. I know it sounds weird as hell, but when I'm saying that is that you need to date the inner self. You need to date God, like full on spend time with it like a person, right? Get to know it, all of this kind of stuff. Because when you do that, you build trust, and you build trust with your inner self, who's part of you anyways, right? So, all right. So hopefully that was helpful to Raheem. Okay. So about Neville, I've been studying Neville and I've been afraid to use tools because I'm afraid that my rational mind will do violence to the loving things I want in life. Not sure how to do this. Okay. So I want to, Tommy, I want to come to this. And this is going to be, by the way, I'm not going to do this justice because I have to go somewhere soon. And please come back on or ask me that question again, or join the free Discord group and we'll talk about it in there. But or maybe I'll just do another live on that. But I do want to answer it right now. So Neville says that there's a dweller within. Okay, he's being very poetic and very storytelling, and he essentially says that, like, listen, everybody has their own dweller within. They also have the angel within, or the woman within, right? And the woman within represents, like, or this angel kind of figure represents, like, your embodiment of all of the good things that you could think, feel, and experience in the world, and so on. And then there's this, this other figure, which is kind of like Carl Jung's idea of the shadow, which I completely disagree with the idea of the shadow concept. And I'll go into why one day, but I have a lot of my training in psychoanalysis. And so I think it's very reductionistic, which means there's more to it than just saying, oh, there's a shadow and it's just a composite of all of our fears and limiting beliefs. And I get what he's saying. And this is the one concept I don't agree with Neville on, because he takes a lot of Jung's influence into his work. They actually interacted. And so the reason why I'm telling you that, though, Tommy, about this is because when you're dealing with, oh my gosh, I'm scared of myself, you're dealing with that side. You're dealing with the dweller within. You're dealing with the limiting beliefs. You're encountering them. And there's many different ways that you can go about overcoming them. For example, if you're afraid of heights, incrementally put yourself through, right? Going up a ladder. and then eventually go to jump out of a plane if you want, right? So that's called exposure therapy within psychology. And so you're taking micro steps along the way to actually overcome those fears. And so what I would encourage you to do is use exposure therapy and start using one tool that you feel more comfortable with, right? And so you want to use those tools that you find that resonates with you. But keep in mind, tools don't manifest, never will. You manifest. So it doesn't matter which one you want, right? And this is, Neville says, test this, right? And he says, choose a method. He doesn't say which one to choose. He said, choose a method, right? In his lecture on picture making, he literally just says, choose a method, right? And so I would encourage you to do that, but try to find a way in which you choose a handful of methods that you think are going to work for you, right? And begin testing them. Okay, this one worked. No, this one didn't work. Okay, keep moving on, right? And I would do meditation. If you're in therapy, great, continue. If not, consider it if you can. Because what you don't want to do is, and I see a lot of this is why I got into this as a psychologist, is not a practicing therapeutic psychologist, by the way, just a social psychologist, is because I saw so many mental health issues coming out of the field of manifestation, of people like, this freaks me out, and I don't know what to do, and am I doing it right, and all of this kind of stuff, right? So that's a great question, but like I said, I could go into probably actually spend one whole session in that, right? Okay, so yes, Neville said all states, exist, but he is talking about both good and bad. If so, how to avoid your rational mind from trying to put you into those loving states? Well, right now, really what you're saying is you fear yourself. That's really, really what you're saying. Because really, when you go into the imagination, who's in there? There's you. So if you create fear, then you fear yourself, right? And so that's what you have to realize. If you can create good, you can create bad. So when he says all states exist, yeah, he's just saying any, where he's breaking these states down and what they are and defining them. He also talks about how we're not creators, we're selectors, right? This is super key to hear, right? You're selecting states, but what's a state? It's a body of beliefs, right? That you keep on rehashing over and over and over. Even Neville defines it that way. He says a state is a body of beliefs, right? And that the more that you assume, the more that it will harden into fact, which means it'll create a person. It'll create personality that has beliefs and reactions and ways of seeing the world and so on and so forth, right? And so I would work, this is going to sound really cheesy because I absolutely hate this phrase because it's been overused and people tie it up to like the woo side of manifestation, and I'm not for the woo side, and I'm not against it, but I'm not for it for my own self. Self-love. You need to work on, I would encourage you to work on self-love. Like that's going to be huge. Like what does it mean to spend time with you, to value yourself, to see yourself as the best person in any room? Not being a jerk about it, not being stuck up, but actually knowing like inside I'm the best there is, right? Because this isn't about you versus other people. This is about you versus you. Meaning you're always growing. That's what the actual Bible means when it says growing glory to glory or from faith to faith. You're growing from one level to another level, not because of other people, but because of yourself. And so what I would encourage you to do again is to spend time defining who you are. Define what it means to be this God. What does it mean to love yourself? What does it mean to value yourself, to celebrate yourself? And then begin actually adding those features, those behaviors, those ways of being every single day, right? Until you die, right? I mean, because this is a lifestyle, right? And so, yeah. Let's see, can I ask you a question? Yeah, sure. Let's see, so yes, okay. All right, so let me see. Sorry, guys, I was watching your conversation. Let me see. So, okay, I'm not gonna probably argue the theology of whether we're God or not. To me, that's not really something that you argue. You either agree or don't agree, right? You know, and you don't have to agree. I'm more than fine with you not agreeing with that you're God. Just because we in this world is the, and I've already answered. I've already answered, Turkey, if you were listening earlier. Yeah, very good. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, so I mean, we are all God. There isn't one God, and we don't die, Turkey. So nobody dies. Energy is just reabsorbed. I mean, even quantum physics shows this, right? Energy doesn't die. It's just reoriented. In fact, the Hebrew word for teshuvah, which is where we get our idea of repentance, is actually saying something very similar, right? Is that because when you break it down, it means like the return. Okay, so what is forgiveness or what is repentance? It's rethinking everything. That's really what it is. It means to think again. But what are you thinking? Well, and what's returning? Because you're not returning to an old state. You're returning to the future state. But how you're doing it is that you're returning the energy that you expended thinking about, feeling about, enacting, and embodying, right? The person that you didn't want to be. Right, and that's what true repentance is. That's why in Hebrew it means return, because you're returning the energy. So so when you so-called die, which I don't believe exists, right? That's a word that we use here to make sense of how we mourn for others while we're here, right? And so, yeah, so that is basically kind of, and I mean, again, I could probably spend a 2-hour thing on that one. And yes, by the way, so Turkey, and I'm gonna have to go, but basically, hey Rebecca, oh, thank you, Tommy. That's very, very kind of you. Is, everything you do, and go check out my other video, Turkey, that I just dropped today. And I kind of answer your question about, because if there's evil in the world, because we create, and we're gods who create. That's why. If there wasn't, we wouldn't have evil in the world, right? And so because we use our thoughts and our behaviors, and I say we as in like humans corporately, not just you or anybody specifically, right? We use it for not good things sometimes. And so that creates. And so, and if you follow that train of thought, watch the news for one day, not to try to trip yourself up, but watch it, not for the sake of watching the news, but for the sake of listening to what's being said and body postures and who's saying what and how they're saying it. And then you'll know why people get punched in the face. Then you'll know why people sleep, all of these kinds of things. So, Turkey, I would definitely dive in deeper into the work of Neville Goddard. He explains all of this, right? And so, and I've already talked about God. I've already shared about it. I kind of feel like you're trolling a little bit right now, to be honest with you. But I've got to go anyways. But if you guys want to keep the conversation going, definitely keep it going here. If you're looking for coaching, get in touch. All science-backed. Like I said, I'm not into the woo side of things. Maybe you are, no judgment. But I already have loads of clients. So, but let me close with this. It matters who you think you are. It actually matters, because if you identify and manifest from the ego, right, is it matters if you think that you're God, because if you're not, right, then you're not going to be manifesting the life that you desire, right? Yeah, again, I've already answered that there, Turkey, and I've answered it with the Bible. I've answered it without the Bible. There's loads of science that actually shows that there's something here in us. We might call it the soul. Neville even pretty much kind of inferred that there might have been like a soul, which he really kind of relates to the idea of the imagination and so on and so forth that lives on beyond us. That's God. That's energy. So as much as you might want to disagree theologically, you can't disagree with the fact that this is an energetic world, right? All science shows that this is energy, okay? God is energy. Okay, and you can quote the Quran, you can quote the Bible. All these are books that I've read, right? The Bhagavad Gita, all of this kind of stuff, right? You can do that, but all of the science, okay? Yes, of course God does, because you're God. See, you're creating a separation between the two. And so because you don't want to accept that, then now you're creating your confirmation bias, which means you're only looking for things that make you sound like you're right, rather than looking for things outside of possibly being wrong, right? Because again, and this is why you would need to really, really deep dive into Neville's work, right? Because what he's saying here is that basically God chose this world. God chose being human. God chose, and there's more to this, obviously. And see, again, you're looking at what we call the ego experience as the same as God, right? Meaning you are also two people, right? Meaning the inner self, which is God, the imagination, the self, okay? And that's part of you. You can't separate from it. You can disagree this whole time, and you don't get to change that. It would be like you trying to fight that the sky isn't blue, right? No matter how much you disagree with it, it just is. And so, that's a part that you're going to have to come to terms with, right? That's the part that you're going to have to wrestle with. That's the part that I would encourage you to deep dive in. So right now, you just want to disprove it. My point is go and try to prove it, right? So go and try to prove it. And if you can't, then great. Go about your life and believe what you want to believe. And that's what this is about anyways, right? Manifestation is about your body of beliefs, okay? And so if you don't want to believe it, you don't have to believe it. But don't be surprised if you can't manifest as a creator, right? Because when you actually accept and, of course he does. Or she does, or it does, or however you might identify. I'm inclusive, right? And so this isn't a human world. This is a shadow world, a mirror world, where we are reflected back to ourselves as God, who is creating our beliefs that we accept about ourselves. And again, check out my newest video today, and I've got to go, but about the I am, okay? About who you are, and that is going to break down, right? No, but see, you're actually defining it through the human lens. So you're saying, oh, because this, then we can't be this. You're creating an ideology, a theology based on what's not, rather than what is. So you have to get to the point where you're like, all of this is God. There isn't separation. You're creating separation. There is no separation, right? And even the biblical authors talked about how there's no separation between God, right? And even the idea of, for example, the word for God, which is Hebrew, Elohim, which is many, but into one, which is us, right? And so, no. Yes, yeah, very, very well said. Yeah, so you can't, right? Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, my audio did cut out. Do you know why somebody called in? Sorry about that. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Oh, am I here now? Is uh, again? So yeah, so so John, let's talk about that for like 1 minute. you are manifesting, but the way you're manifesting is through selection. You're not creating in that sense, right? Right. And so this is very, very, very valuable for you to recognize, right? And again, please know that you are God, right? You know what I mean? And so, so again, it does matter. Okay. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for jumping on. If you're looking for coaching, get in touch. Much love to you. Thank you for all the subs. You guys are all awesome. And I do plan to hopefully do these more, probably once or twice a week. Leave in the comments what kind of things you'd like to explore through a series, maybe, whether it be Neville's work or manifestation or psychology or whatever it is. So much love to you all. Thank you.